Very honored Frater BT's Esoterinerd podcast, episode 102, in which very honored Frater RC and I conclude with the second half of our conversation. If you haven't already heard episode 101, you may want to do that because we jump in right at the middle of a conversation, and it'd probably be better to know what hour and a half led to that second hour and a half. But it's up to you. If you just want to listen to this one for now and maybe listen to them backwards and see what effect that has, I'm all for that. Anyhow. But first, Transformations and Footnotes. So for those of you who are new to the Esoterinerd podcast, this is the segment in which I recite my father's book that he wrote in 1976. It's called Transformations. And I usually play some either Pat Metheny or Tangerine Dream. I think today we'll probably go with Tangerine Dream Ricochet. There we go. That's nice. This is Transformations, Chapter 4, Verse 14. They will first blame this group, and then that group, and then this religion, and then that religion. Then they will blame drugs, then pollution, then youth, then sex, then Puritanism, then the bomb, then the peace creeps, then themselves. It gets boring, doesn't it? Verse 15. Then a few of them will do their Santa Claus takeaway and maybe even create living happily ever after. They will, only if they get something about the flesh place and a lot of other places. Living happily or unhappily or mediocrely or extraordinarily ever after, and ever after all by itself, all have one thing in common: their problems. Verse 16. Really, it's not fair, except when it is. That makes it even more unfair when it's unfair, also more fair when it's fair than if it were just undifferentiated fairness or unfairness. That's what it's like in the flesh place, and many other levels and places. What it's like in the white light is something else again, except that it includes what it's like here too, as entertainment. Verse 17. Anyhow, for those running around mad with reasoning, listening to, thinking in, looking at, and wishing for all in their mirrors, they will keep on a while. Only something you and I know is inevitable. It's Kali Yuga o'clock. It's really unreasonable. You and I, we know that. Verse 18. You and I watched a hamster in an exercise wheel once, running himself into an ecstasy. He ran really fast, and then hung on, and the wheel took him around, bounced up as if to start for another turn, and seesawed back and forth to a stop. Verse 19. We watched that hamster give it another go. This time he ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. Then he hung on, and the wheel gave him a ride twice. Then again it stopped. He kept hanging on, dizzy-eyed. Is that getting stuck on happily ever after? Verse 20. Anyhow, the hamster went over into the corner of the cage, burrowed into the sawdust, and hid. Verse 21. The new tape that's on is set to the time of Kali Yuga o'clock, isn't it? Yes, you and I, we've seen it and listened to it and lived it before. Some of them didn't want to. Maybe now some of them are ready for remembering it. Verse 22. That's the thing with this old new tape. The thing that makes it seem crazy to the ones stuck in the Hall of Mirrors. Significance is optional. So, once again, if you've already heard episode 101, you know a bit about RC's repertoire. If you're jumping in at the halfway mark, feel free to check him out on Amazon. All you have to do is go to Amazon and search for Frater RC. That's Frater space RC. And you'll see a plethora of published materials. And yeah, that's a good place to start. But that's my old friend, and this was a conversation we had a few days back, and I decided to break it into two parts just to make it interesting, or just to be able to do two segments, or maybe to make up for the 2-year gap between episode 99 and episode 100. Some combination of all of these, surely. But I've gone on enough about that, and so without further ado, let's get to that interview, shall we?
One of the things I'm asking myself a lot these days is, as we go into building up towards doing the Yeats initiations, and he has 5 that will define the Celtic mysteries. And one key thing, I think the most brilliant thing I've done, if I may say so, is I've taken his Adept initiation, or his Portal initiation, and rather than making it a doorway to a whole other inner order of Celtic mysteries, what I'm saying is that's the Adept graduation of the Order of Celtic Mysteries. So it's like you do all 5 initiations over 5 years, you do these curriculums in between, and then you're done. You've graduated it. You finished it.
Yeah, it's nice to have a graduation.
No future cult potential, right?
Yeah.
No chance of running a cult afterwards. No one gets to be in charge, permanently. It's just something that can be run by the people who are going through it, and then helping others go through it. And then what those people do with that afterwards, if they want to form sphere groups or just show up and do different ceremonies, because they're beautiful initiations, especially when you see how they can be rounded off and smoothed out. The first neophyte is written by Mathers, the second one by Yeats and other adepts, and together they do actually form quite this beautiful structure I've created. And the question, of course, that's constantly on my mind, as you can imagine, is how to not fall into the pitfalls of churches, mainstream religions, and other magical orders that are keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Because I think if you can nip some of that stuff in the bud, then you could actually have quite a beautiful magical system with magical people working in a group without any without a lot of that BS. I mean, all new mistakes, right? Like, I'm sure there's always going to be stuff, but like, it can be done a lot better. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could learn from churches about how they run. I mean, they're pretty much empty and vapid and without any sort of living mystical traditions and practices. We have magic and power coming up the yin yang out the wazoo from the ritual work that we have learned to do in these magical traditions. I mean, like anyone who's very skilled with Goetic evocation or Enochian magic or any form of these traditions is going to be able to do some very amazing stuff in ritual work, which you can't find in a church, right? But at the same time, a lot of the problems that you see happening right now in the OTO, they've just, I'm now a manager on ThelemaTube. I'm now uploading videos direct on my own accord to ThelemaTube without any oversight. And that's because some people in the OTO feel like I'd be a good person to contribute to the development of Thelema.
Nice,
I guess. And so I was saying to the people involved, because the OTO just sort of put on permanent probation like I think 100 members or more. I may or may not have seen a list that is private, and I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. But like, and like, so you know, you have them making this huge mistake, and a lot of it, I believe, is due to this issue of gender going on with like trans people and gender fluid people in the Ecclesia Gnostic Catholica and their mass, right? The Gnostic mass. And these are amateur mistakes in the church world.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't see churches making these mistakes anymore. They sorted that stuff out to a large extent. The mainstream churches, of course, not the new fundamentalisms that are cocking everything up again, but like the mainstream churches, they're like, yeah, we don't do that. That doesn't work. That ends in this or that or a crusade. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we fucked up the world trying to do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've got new problems with like signing their names to globalization. So in the Order of Celtic Mysteries, which is the real thing that drew me back in, was not just you, but then Eric Sisko, as we will call him. You know, he sent me the Yeats material and was like, hey, you were going to do this once upon a time, and you've been working on it and running rituals for it and giving classes on it since the 90s. Do you think you might finish it? And I was like, now I might, now that I've got this information you sent me. And yeah, so it was those two things together that made me realize I want to go through those rituals. And so if I have to put other people through them for 5 years so that they can then do them, and then I can go through them, that sounds like a good way to spend age 40 to 50, in my opinion.
Yeah, nice.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'll build a thing for 5 years, then I get to go through it, and then I can, you know, die happy. And anything that gives us an excuse to get together and recite Yeats poetry is always a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Dead Poets Society.
Fusing Celtic paganism and druidry with Golden Dawn inner order techniques, like, can you think of, and entheogens, like Yeats was big into hashish and peyote. Can you think of anything cooler? Like, to me, that sounds like the best way possible to spend 10 or 20 years doing that with a bunch of people who are just as into it as I am.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's my yoga.
Nice. Well, let's see. I suppose it's been a few hours. Is there anything?
We've only done an hour and a half.
Oh, we have? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to edit this out later because I'm gonna have to run to the little boys' room here.
How about I just pause it?
You pause yours and I'll edit mine later, or I'll leave it in.
You can hit pause on yours too.
Oh, I can?
Yeah, just hit pause. Yeah, we usually have to take a break because, you know, I like to push people to their limits. Good old Scorpio ascendant. I thought you might like, and I struggled with it because I haven't really even listened to it in years, and I retranscribed the lyrics from a song from 14 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna sing you a song.
Okay.
Just for you. No one else is allowed to hear it.
Oh, I shouldn't record this?
It's something you asked for. No, I'm joking.
Okay.
I'm joking. Yeah, no, definitely record it. All right, you ready for this?
Yeah.
In this darkly splendid world, I went to make my way one day through the dark night like a child. I set out to find the one true way on the forest dew-damp lawn. By the Abbey Agnes mountainside, woke up to the golden dawn. And to Telestai I learned to cry. And when all the phantoms vanish, and I see the formless fire, as we dance within the moonlight, naked in nature's empire. In the vault of light I heard the whisperings of some god now known, like a lover's gentle word. I knew that it was time now to atone for the sweethearts that I'd wronged, for the sorrows of Isis who seeks for the kisses that belong upon only one true lover's cheek. My love, my heart did die, oh my love, My heart did die, oh my love. My heart did die, oh my love. Sweetheart, please hear my sigh. Into darkness we must go to initiate all we can be. My true love I must know. Open your eyes now and come with me, for the sweat our bodies shared, for the wine and bread your body is. Please, my story, know I care. Aphrodite, goddess, you're my bliss. And when all the phantoms vanish and I see the formless fire, as we dance within the moonlight, naked in nature's empire, and old Enoch rose above, but he had not yet seen your face. Now I'm trapped between your love and the other side, filled up with grace. So let's dance into the night, round the fire of our passion's flame. This truth we cannot fight, we cannot deny our lover's name. There you go.
Woo!
I cut out all the repetitions and stuff like that. Darkly Splendid World. You asked me to do that for you for years, and I can't play instruments in my current environment more than once a month, or something like that. I have fill in excuse of your choice. But there you go. There you
Nice.
go.
And
that
there's
was my, that was from 2006. So when I was starting to wrestle and go through, starting to contemplate and what I had been through in the Golden Dawn, which was just, it was such a treat, but also such a ordeal. I mean, right?
Indeed.
I mean, how long were you in it altogether? Like
18 and a half years.
Jesus.
Man,
it makes my 7 years seem like nothing.
Only about 15 of that was in the real cult.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it started to go that way, and I guess it went really hardcore that way towards the end. And that's when people
in California,
talk to me about
it was more that way in the beginning. Like California had its own story where Canada, Ka he knew what it was like in California, but he created a different thing. Like,
no, Nineveh Shadrach, as they now call him, is I think always had quite a healthy view towards how magical orders should run, and he's changed his group's name many times over the years because they understand it's not about creating some eternal human edifice. It's about finding a group of people set towards a specific task and mission, and completing that mission, and then coming back together and reforming in a different way after that, whether it's with the same people or not. And I think that's a very healthy model for magical orders to follow.
Know. Well, it's like corporations used to be a group of people uniting their purses to build a bridge for the town, and then it would dissolve after the bridge was finished. And that was kind of a very sweet, it made sense. But then, they said, well, let's just never dissolve it and also make it swallow the whole world.
Yeah, I mean that brings us full circle to the globalism we see happening now, which I always say I really hope aliens are. I hope the reason this is happening is because of aliens. If aliens all just show up and we're like, yo, we were just preparing you for us, wouldn't that make all this crap worthwhile?
Yeah, Gordon used to say that the LA basin looked like it was ready for the mothership to just like pick it up. Like it was just waiting, everybody like praying to the aliens, come and take us away.
Do you have a story? Do you have an alien sighting story like some people do?
Not really. There was one time there was this purple light that was moving beside the car, and it didn't make sense. And but other than that, nothing that I've really seen. I mean, of course, like going into certain types of trance and half asleep states and communing with beings. It could be interdimensional, it could be psychological, it could be a number of things. But yeah, I've had the feeling that I was connecting with consciousness that was intelligent but not human in the past, but nothing that I've seen. No, I mean, I other people's stories. I always say there's this other story that wasn't mine that I always tell because it was such a compelling story, and the way it was told like had me like, damn, this really went down, and this is some pretty solid evidence that there's UFOs, you know. But but my dad was way into it. He and his mom used to go to Giant Rock, where I think that dome is now out in the desert. The Integratron. My grandma helped pay for that when Tassard, whatever his name was the guy that owned that land. So they would show up in the like in the 40s and the early 50s and spend the night there and just look up at the sky and wait for the aliens. So that's interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Into all that stuff.
Was it your mom that joined the Golden Dawn before you, or did
No,
you guys
we
join
joined
together?
the same day.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Yeah, we were doing Wicca, and my mom found the flyer, and
That's what we were doing. Me and my
yeah,
mom were doing Wicca, and when Ka interviewed me the second time with my mom to sign waivers, they tried to get her to join, and she said no. And driving back, I was like, "Why didn't you join?" She's like, "Oh, I didn't want to make it your thing into my thing as well." And I remember thinking like that. I had a lot of respect for her for doing that, though I wouldn't have minded at all. Actually, she would
right.
have been allowed to participate fully. Actually, I would have probably been allowed to participate in all the group classes that first year if she had joined, because I would have had a parent there. Whereas
Yeah.
as a result, I had to have private lessons for the first year, which worked out fine for me. I had no problem with that because they didn't want a 15-year-old around all this adult shenanigans, right?
Right.
Once I was 16, it was another issue because in Canada, 16 is the age of consent, and it's a different legal status. I know that's not the same in the States,
Yeah.
but it's like, yeah, in 16 in Canada, if someone's like propositions me after class and I was like, yeah, let's rock and roll, completely legal. In the States, you got some like 25-year-old propositioning a 16-year-old after some magic class.
Right.
That's a big deal in the
Yeah.
States. In
Yeah.
Canada, that's just two consenting adults.
Hmm.
So that was what was going on there. But yeah, she did join eventually, of course, when she saw how much it did for my life. I mean, that's something that one of the reasons I still talk about, I think, the Golden Dawn in such a positive way is because I had 90% of it was a very positive experience that turned my life around. Like I went from within a month of joining, I went from being a straight F student in school to breaking every academic record we had. And
Nice.
I just did a complete 180
Hmm.
or whatever the math is. That's 180, yeah. So I bought a special bottle of wine for this because this is a big deal for me, man. Talking with you again, it's been so long, and it's so hard to have these kinds of long conversations these days.
I got a special bottle of weed for this.
You have a bottle of weed?
It happens to be in a jar.
Well, you should smoke some. Have you done DMT yet?
Yeah, back in 11, that was my year where I ripped. I felt like I was moving through the years, and at that time I was in 76. I was in 2011. I experienced what the world was going through in 1976, and I think I might be getting close to arriving at where I actually am. I don't know if I have done that yet. I think I might be somewhere in the 80s, but anyway, I'm half joking, but
Like Benjamin Button on a spiritual plane.
yeah. But I don't even know what what was I talking about? Oh yeah, DMT. I wrote a bunch of poetry. My God, yeah, I did that a number of times, and it resulted in my being here in India. Actually, the fourth time I did it, I had this strong sense that if I kept going, working in that office, being unhealthy, being involved in the soap opera of the Golden Dawn at that time, that I would kind of die an early death, and that I needed to focus on yoga and meditation. And I got this strong phrase: in India, there are people who know how to be human properly. And so that kind of became a beacon in my mind, and I started to to talk more and more about wanting to go to India for a long period of time, and it well, it eventually led to my being here. You know, like kind of getting myself into a position where there was nothing holding me back, and just buying a ticket. And
Oh man, I was so close to getting to your wedding because I was already in Europe. I was so close. If I hadn't had my bank account hacked, oh baby, I would have been there. Oh yeah, but
oh
yeah,
man,
there's the cliche of what it's like for a Westerner, especially like an LA boy from Pasadena, some like blonde haired dude named Edward
yeah.
move into India. But that's the cliche we can all imagine with a smile. What's the reality like?
Well, it's interesting because there's this other American who met me at the grocery store, and just in case he's listening to this, I mean, hi Dale. But
Hi Dale.
he's from Georgia, and he's like a bit older than me, and it seemed like he was assuming that he and I were exactly the same person because we were both American. I'm like, wow, you know, like if we met in the U.S., like we'd be like, what do you have in common, you know, like certainly not this or that, but no, I mean, yeah, like most people who end up here are at least oriented in a particular way, like a particular direction. You know, most of them are the people that are obviously they love Indian culture and Eastern paths of thinking and spirituality, generally speaking. But obviously, there's the bros. There's a spectrum of you know exactly how people are oriented as far as that goes. And I came to like in 2011, 2012, that was when I kind of put out, I added like thousands of people in the yoga community around the world. And that included Priyal, who I ended up married to when I came to India. So obviously I'm very glad that I did that, but it also made me realize that I have nothing in common with maybe 60% of the New Age and yoga people. Like I thought that when I left Golden Dawn, I was like, well, I'll just delve into this, and surely this will be, you know, the thing. And then I realized, oh shoot, I don't even like these people, you know, like most of them. I don't know, but then some of them are cool, and I'm glad that I put my feelers out to see who these people were, because I ended up knowing at least a handful of people that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
So sort of like how I went from Golden Dawn to, well, there was overlap, but into the mainstream Christian church world, you went into the yogic world, where
Yeah,
we both found out those groups of people are just as fucked up as every other group of people,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Certain things are
Is that,
universally human.
yeah, as in being fucked up. Like we're all
Yeah,
fucking sinners, however you want to phrase it. We're all
yeah,
just a bunch of kids running around trying to figure shit out. And we realize that more than ever today, that our there's no adults on the planet. Essentially, it seems like
yeah.
all the adults have checked out, and then they're like, maybe there were never was any adults, and I think that might be true. That might be
Yeah.
true.
Well, it seems like in the 80s, they were making movies where the kids were all, they knew what was going on and the adults didn't know. And it was like this fun fantasy everybody would have. What if the adults were totally clueless and the kids were the only ones that knew that there was aliens running around? And then during that same decade and 70s, you had that question authority bumper sticker. And, but now you have both of those things have gone to such an extreme that the whole thing's folded inside out on itself, where the adults in the room are there and they're just trying to patiently explain what's going on, while everybody else is like, just because you have all this PhD doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. Well, it actually does, though. Like, I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Is it less of a? Do you find it to be a more spiritual culture at its root,
In
like
India,
in daily life? Yeah,
or today, as
in
opposed to the
India.
80s? Well, yes. I mean, it's magically like when like there's magic everywhere. Like in the way that people live their lives. I mean, like a traditional family that uh, in in the U.S. traditional means Christian, And there's a certain magical element to that, believing that Jesus is going to save them from hell. It's certainly a very magical kind of thinking. But in India, traditional means when the child is getting married, then you consult the priest and the astrologer, and they
Yeah.
look at the, so there's, and if they're like, well, they're almost perfectly compatible except for this one thing. So the bride needs to wear gold and sapphire, and the groom needs to wear an emerald, and we need to light a fire at 5 a.m. when Jupiter is over there, and do this 2-hour prayer to these particular set of gods, and then that'll iron out any complications that might come up in the marriage later on. So that's about as magical as it gets. That's like that's
pure
living
astrological magic.
yeah, and that's not even in a cult. That's just in a village
That's cult. That's Indian culture.
that's the structure, yeah. And then so people come from that and maybe move to the city and move away from that, but that's kind of everybody's grandparents and everybody's cousins back home. So that's really interesting, and there's differences from north to south, from east to west. So we had like a southern Tamil style wedding, which is, when we came to Mysore, we were showing them the pictures, and they were saying, "Oh, well, you were standing over there. You should have been standing over there." And it was like, "Oh, well, that's how they do it down there," and that's not that far away from Mysore. So it varies from region to region. Like it's anybody's guess whether they would have even come together as one big country if it hadn't been for the intervention of outside forces. They could have just divided up and said, "Okay, this state will actually be its own country." And so Hindi is kind of the national language, but everybody is expected, like, if you really want to go anywhere, then you really ought to learn English. But then there's the people that are like, what, we shouldn't be thinking that way. We should make Hindi our national language. Japan, China, and Germany don't expect everybody to learn English, but they're successful. But it's like, yeah, but they were also kind of assholes at least once, where India doesn't, they don't try to conquer the world ever, or try to colonize the world. It's just not on the agenda for India. So it kind of makes sense to learn one of the lingua franca, at least, to succeed on the world stage. But yeah, I don't know. These are interesting things to go about, but it's yeah. So there's a whole spectrum from rich to poor, from city, from urban to rural. There's black magicians. There's the Agori. There's all kinds of interesting. There's a spectrum of what became of Tantra. There's of course all the Western, the things that are here for the interest of the Westerner, like ISKCON, the Hare Krishna cults, that they're in every country. There's always stories about them and their shenanigans. I think I did an interview that it turned out it didn't record, so that was really sad. But it was all about there was a woman that was really good at recruiting, and she was Indian, but she was living in Colombia, and they said, "You're going to move to California, and in order to do that, we're going to have you marry this guy, but you're never going to talk to him." But then they snuck out and had a daughter, and so I interviewed that daughter, or she and I interviewed her dad about the experience. And so, but it didn't record. That would have been such a great episode. So that's based in India. The Baha'i, we have there's this big the Lotus Temple in Delhi. It's very interesting when you get into all the Sikh, the Jainist, there's a lot of the Sikh. It turns out they do like fire dances and have parades with music and shouting in the middle of the night, and the kids sword fight, like play sword fight, and that I didn't know about that, until I was living in a Sikh neighborhood in Delhi. So yeah, there's just a lot of interesting stuff. Some of it is very magical, though, like when the guy opens his cigarette stand in the morning and he lights candle to the little picture of Lakshmi on the side of the table he brings out with him. And you don't buy cigarettes from him until he's finished with his 21 times moving his incense in a circle and bowing to the statue of the goddess of wealth to help him with his business that day. And it's real for them. It's like they're not putting it on.
Yeah.
This is they're living in that world. So it's very nice. It's actually that aspect of it. Like, nobody thinks it's that weird that I have a shrine to Jesus, Lakshmi, Buddha, and everyone else here. Like it's where in US it was like, oh, you're into this kind of thing. It's like, of course you're into this kind of thing. This is part of life. It's
Yeah, you're just being a good citizen.
yeah. But yeah, in living in the temple, walking around bowing at people with a white robe on, for all those years. So it feels very natural, very comfortable.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. I wanted to tell you, like, a few years back, or 10 years back, I went online and I found a bunch of articles and stuff. And like, here, one of them says, Kamalapati Tripathi's great grandson gives Congress hope. And then it's like talking about this politician, Lalitesh Tripathi, sitting Congress MLA for Marahan Assembly segment in the Mirzapur district. And I'm like, that dude was my buddy at the Waldorf School in North Vancouver.
Oh, wild.
Yeah, right? So like we always thought of him as just that Indian stoner kid, Lolly, like Lollipop. And then when he graduated, he's like, so I'm going to go back to India and get an arranged marriage and get millions of dollars and take my title as Prince Lalitesh Tripathi. And we were like, what the fuck are you saying, Lolly? And we're like, Lolly, sit down. You're stoned. We don't care if it's your high school graduation. Get your ass down, you stoned motherfucker. And now he's an Indian politician, or became an Indian politician. It's like, sure enough, he was a prince or something. And I've stayed in touch with some of his siblings. They're triplets, and their last name's Tripathi. How do you like that? They're triplets, nice. Tripathi. But I've stayed in touch and always been fascinated by their family story because there's the caste system, right? So I think that it was the dad that violated that and married a foreign woman, so he was outcast, and then raised his kids in Waldorf School in Vancouver. But the kids had the option of going back and having. Well, I don't know much about the caste system, but I do know it's deeply tied into the ideas of karma, and not karma as we sort of distort it in Western New Ageism, but karma in the sense of
it's like regulated your karma. If you're on this class and you do really well, and then you get to move up one class, but if you're at this class, you move down. Yeah. So it's like
doesn't that strike you as like some sort of really obvious social control mechanism?
I mean, that was supposedly that's what the people from present day Iran, who they call the Aryans, not to be confused with Hitler's Aryans, but
or Blavatsky's.
They kind of brought down the Sanskrit and the Vedas, as far as I know. I mean, if every person in India heard me say that, I'm sure each of them would have something to say about it, or they'd have that's not proven, or that's like oversimplified, or this kind of thing. People have their point of view about it, but they basically brought the religion and made the caste system with themselves at the top. Like, everybody needs to listen to us and our wisdom that we bring to you. This is the caste system where the Brahmins listen to everything we're saying. And so even in South, Pew was asking like that, where people have darker skin, the Brahmins have a little bit lighter skin. It's like, well, yeah, the Aryans made themselves, the priest class that rules them all. I mean, it's kind of yeah. There was some, I forget the name of an ancient Indian philosopher that said that there's 5 kinds of people. And but he wasn't saying that there's 5 kinds of people, like 5 kinds of families or 5 kinds of DNA or something. It got interpreted that way. Something similar happened, I think, in Western, where they did something similar, and it became like the basis of a concept of class or a concept of like racial hierarchy or something like that. But Yeah, the warrior, the farmer, the priest, and so on and so forth. And then the untouchable.
Yeah, we did have that same structure in the Christian West. I mean, a lot of the Christmas songs.
Carl was the middle class, the people who aren't slaves and they're not nobility, they're in between, the middle class, the Charles.
Interesting.
And then then along came Charles Martel, Charlemagne, and all that. So it was like Jobab, like King Jobab, king middle class, king not quite nobility. Yeah, so people could probably relate with that.
I mean, Charlemagne's sort of the reason we all learned to read. He was the first ruler to say that everyone needed to learn how to read. And he created schools and stuff like that for people to learn how to read.
Yeah, that's great.
Aside from just genociding populations of his enemies and all that usual jazz.
Right.
Have you shared much Golden Dawn magic or Western Hermetic magic with Pew at all?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, not the parts that I'm not interested in. She likes. I mean, she's not like wanting to like start on the path or anything, but she respects it, like as for what it is.
Well, I'm curious on the perspective, like, because it's always interesting. Like this last year in California, I saw a lot of magic being done by the Fellowship of Isis and the Temple of Isis, which grew out of this Irish Clonigal castle tradition fused with the California BOTA through Granny Rainbow, who created the Union Temple of Isis in the 70s. And they're doing essentially pagan goddess worship, what some would call low magic. So really structurally it's quite high magic, because it's quite religious in its symbolism, as opposed to just like hoodoo or some of the other techniques. I mean, the techniques we're referring to that have to do with material objects and purposeful gain, as opposed to just spiritual purification and ascension and development of your soul, right? That's sort of the distinction we see. And there's definitely things that I'll see in other magical traditions that strike me as really powerful and effective, and things that just seem like window dressing that I don't really need or care too much about. Yeah. So I'm curious, for someone like your Indian wife, who wasn't raised in the West or brought up as kids in our magical tradition as we were, is there stuff that strikes her? Do you know if is she like, well, the Enochian stuff's really cool, or the Egyptian Hermetic stuff? Is there anything that she finds? I'm curious what people find interesting when they're embedded in another culture and coming from a very different tradition.
Right. Well, she, in particular, her parents were into Osho and Buddha.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So
Osho.
Coming from that. Not exact. So, but the family was traditional Hindu, so everybody knew all the traditional Hindu things of the region. And but then coming from more of a new age, position here in India, Christianity has come to be very interesting for her. So I've encouraged her to do whatever she likes, but I've introduced also the Gnostic view, and through like various YouTube sources, she's kind of navigated her way through, learning the spectrum and realizing, oh wow, this guy's really full of shit, this kind of thing, so I've gotten to slowly explain, well, evangelism, it can mean the ancient use of the word is the person who goes and converts people, and the modern use of the word is it's the Americans who support Trump, and they meet in big halls and get people on TV to give them thousands of dollars. They're the evangelists. So it's like she's at the point where she understands a lot of the different subtleties of that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Well, it's actually really not straightforward, is it?
Right. So, but the Catholicized Golden Dawn practice that I do from memory, she likes the incense. She likes the way that, my singing, as she'll say. But when I do healing work, everybody that I've done healing work on really feels like that none of them say, yeah, I didn't get much out of that. Like they always love the healing work that I do. Like
good old Hermetic healing still works,
right.
eh?
Like
Yeah.
in one case it trumped, Indian black magic. Like I was like, you don't need to go to you don't need to have someone go remove this curse. You just have to like, let me do some work with you in the circle. And they said, well, yeah, the pain's gone. Thank you. And so that's
Yeah.
been, that's nice. I don't do that a lot. I do it from time to time, but that
Yeah, right.
became
No, I know what you mean, man.
that became my focus in the end. Like, so I'm not really into all this elemental or planetary stuff. Like, I just focus on kind of the vault current and the RC current, the Rose Cross current, and the
I know you're
healing.
invoking me on a daily basis.
But I
You
like
have the
talking.
picture of me on your altar.
I
The
like
picture of
talking
me.
at times about all the other stuff, but as far as what I do ritually, it's down to that. Just
Yaheshua mihi omnia.
yeah, basically. But
Yeah.
I also have my Lakshmi shrine, but and I've got my Vajrayana stuff going on over there. So I don't know. I like to keep it a little bit personalized, I guess. Like a priest would come in and maybe disapprove of what I've got going on, but you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
Here's another interesting thing that you might find fascinating, given what you just said. So, like, there's been this movement in the occult world I've discovered towards using the grimoires as grammars, which is what it sort of means, what grimoire means, as for very specific magical processes to evoke spirits and get favors from spirits or talk to angels and all this stuff, blah blah blah, right? But then the academics came along because they've been getting into this stuff, into occultism, and they're like, actually, the grimoires were not a strict grammar, but more as suggested ways of contacting certain spirits. And once you contacted the spirit and had direct contact, you didn't need the grimoire so much anymore because you were learning from the spirit directly. So the academics like Dr. Sophie Page and a bunch of all of them, they all agree on this because it's actually true. This is how the grimoires worked, and how the magicians would use them was to get in touch with spirits and then develop their own techniques and relationships after that. They weren't always going back to these same fundamental practices over and over and over again, like, because as if they skipped a step, something bad would happen or it wouldn't work.
yeah.
Not at all. And that's something that I've always considered to be very true because of how we were taught. Like, we learned all the basic Golden Dawn practices. We worked them ad nauseum. We put them in our diaries. We wrote, I did this many of this and on this time and on this day. And then you do that for years. But over that course of time, we developed other things, right? And the rituals that you and I probably use the most are ones that aren't in any books, that are the ones that developed over a couple decades of our order, developing things from essentially the grimoire corpus of material in the Golden Dawn tradition.
It's like a notoricon. Like, it only has power in what it's an abbreviation of. So like, if you get everything down to 20 notoricons and then you get them down to one notoricon, then that notoricon might have the power of all those years of like, it's like the password to the computer that has all the filing system already in it.
That's the idea.
Yeah,
That's definitely the idea
of a magic word. Ararita, like, or anything like that. LVX.
Yeah, the super code, the superscripts that give you access to the code language.
Yeah.
Very interesting. What do you think of this whole, like, occult revolution that's happening in the world? Like, there's an argument that people turn to magic and superstition at certain times in history. How do you think magic and occultism is influencing us at the current stage in history? Like, why is it showing up again? Is it because we've all turned into a bunch of uneducated, anti-intellectual dumbasses who can't talk to people that disagree with us? Or is there something else at play? Because history doesn't actually ever repeat itself. History has cycles, but no two things ever happen the same way, not once. So there's always in a repetition the opportunity for something new, because the repetition is never a repetition. It is always the return to something that is now different than it was before.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the US, I think part of it could be seen to be, you know, on the one hand, you have people looking at the way that everybody thinks and saying, we need people to think, you know, in a more evolved way, and think that, you know, for example, that Black people and white people should have equal opportunities, and that one doesn't need to be kept out of the pool of the other. And so they try to get everybody to think that way, or they try to, like, okay, in the media we'll have these examples put, and we'll make sure this is shown, or whatever it is, we'll institute this law and this policy here, and try to get everybody to think that way. So the people that are resisting thinking the way that they're trying to get them to think it became very angry and hostile, and they felt like they were being oppressed by an organized and intelligent, you know, Borg-like entity. And so that phenomenon resulted in the current bipolarification, where the people that have woven it into their identity, that they agree with and accept that there are certain truths that were unearthed in the 1960s, which we must now live by. And then there are the people that disagree with that. And so that's the current conflict as far as I can see it. But as far as how the occult has gotten into the mix, I think part of that is because of the proliferation of media and the, you know, for mediums, for example, like YouTube and Netflix, and where, you know, I mean, more than 13 or more than however many there used to be of the big network produced shows that everybody watched. Now there's millions. Now people can drift one way or the other from one interest into another. They can start interested in, you know, one thing and end up, and then to learning about the occult, or at least by way of conspiracy theories, becoming familiar with the Freemasons, and there's a lot of people that are raised Christian that will become interested in anything that pushes any buttons about fear buttons about the Book of Revelation. So obviously there's a lot of symbolism of the Book of Revelation, and for example, the Catholic Church, people used to say the Pope was the Antichrist, and, you know, it was perfectly, you know, reasonable to the fundamentalist American of old. But now, you know, they can look toward the Freemasons, or they can look toward you know, any secret groups, and the concept of Lucifer, the concept of this or that. It gets supercharged when people are coming from fear and Christianity, I think. But it comes in upside down, and then they might have a perverse interest and start to say, I'm going to embody this, but then they might flip back again and say, oh, the devil, you know, tricked me, and now I'm back, and, you know, Jesus is. So I've seen all that stuff kind of, you know, in the YouTube stream as Pia was navigating the whole spectrum. I wouldn't have, you know, known about it if it weren't for her interest. I'm more interested in Eastern things, so it's kind of like an interesting yin yang thing, where I'm more able to point out the subtleties between the different lineages of the Tibetan tantric yoga Buddhism traditions, as opposed to the different types of Christians. Like
it sounds like a good match.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's good. Like, I want to know all about tell me about your homeland, Moadib.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, I just want to know about you, Shani, because, girl, you're hot stuff. She's like, aw, shucks. We just know the secret of the universe. I want to hear about the ocean and the waters and this and the celebrity gossip. Yeah. Did you keep in touch with many people from the old days?
Not really. Mostly down to about 2 people that I talk to on a regular basis. And then But I mean, I'll keep in touch with most people. Like if it takes me 5 days to get back, there's like rings of people from blocked to unfriended to the 5 day waiting period before they get a response to the 2 day waiting period. And then there's the people that I instantly respond. So it's like, I mean, just for my own sanity, I have to do it that way, because in the past I always was quick to respond. If I didn't respond to my students right away, then of course I'd get a call. Frater, I understand you're not getting back to your students. I'd be like, God damn it. So I became very
You're
neurotic.
slipping away.
Yeah, I became very neurotic about answering the phone when it would ring or calling it back right away. So now I definitely don't do that.
Frater, I think you're backsliding. I think you're backsliding, Frater.
Yeah, no.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, you're definitely top on my list of people to visit, along with, I mean, Austin, Texas. I want to see Jeff, and because Jeff Contreras, like a lot of people from our order, went off and are running very successful orders that are doing quite well, and that's something interesting. I sort of often see us as like this very large international seedbed for a lot of really good things that sprung out of it,
Right.
because I mean, the GD Collegium Spiritus Sancti, the GDCSS, they're still doing their thing. And I just had on the podcast a few months ago, Augustin Reyes. And you know him, like he joined, I think, literally the year after we were gone. And so he went up and and he's even on hiatus, but they've got a whole slew of adepti running a functioning order.
Yeah, that's good.
Who are trained by people that we trained. And so the tradition just keeps trucking on, whether we care or not, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what's interesting about it to me.
Yeah.
And Jeff Contreras is one of the top guys at Sodalitas Rosea Crucis, which along with Tommy Westland has a whole outer order Golden Dawn training system that's apparently very highly rated. Samuel Robinson of the what's it called, pansofers.org rates it 5 stars. It's the only one he rates 5 stars, because he goes through on his website and he rates all the Golden Dawn orders with stars. And like I think it's hilarious. My mom actually went through her portal initiation with Robinson and Martin. So that means she actually got initiated into portal not through our order, which she was trained in, but with Sam Robinson through Zaleski's order tradition and lineage. And Zaleski, of course, along with Nick Farrell, those are two of the adepts that were brought in through the Whare Ra in New Zealand, which goes back to Falcon. So that's the actual unbroken lineage from W.B. Yeats and the original order and the Stella Matutina side. Isn't that interesting? Like that stuff was actually going on. So because there was this for decades, it seemed like there was this popular narrative that the Golden Dawn had faded out. And today, the most common thing people say to me is, I heard the Golden Dawn didn't exist anymore and hasn't for 50, 60 years. And I'm like, oh, honey, no. Yeah, no, the problem isn't that it doesn't exist anymore. The problem is that there's almost too much of it, and some of those groups are a little bit too vocal for their own good, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? Like we had no idea really about the integrity of a lineage tradition that was continued on. Of course, see, that's one thing about, you talk about our order being a little bit Catholicized in the inner order. It was nothing, man. It was nothing compared to the Christianization of the Stella Matutina through the New Zealand temple and the Whare Ra tradition. That was like, that's super Christian. It would put us to shame. And apparently Nick Farrell does one of the initiations. He swapped out the set of gods that was used from Egyptian to Greek.
Interesting.
I think it's is it the Theoricus initiation? Yeah, or maybe it was the Kibiri. I think he removed the Kibiri of the Samothracian mysteries out of Practicus and put in Greek gods like Diana or Aphrodite and stuff like that. I just heard that through the grapevine. But that's interesting, isn't it? Hey.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they could be Zeus, Persephone, and Apophis or something like that. But
I mean, people don't like me saying this, but I consider myself a traditionalist. I like
or
the,
Hades.
I like the. I don't know anything about Hades.
I like the tradition of the Kabiri and the Samothracian mysteries.
Oh, me
I think
too.
we don't know much about it. I love
Yeah.
the Kabiri because we just do know so little about it, and I've studied it academically, and even academically, we don't know much about it.
Mm.
And the texts from the Corpus Hermeticum are beautiful, the way they're interwoven into the initiations.
Yeah.
I'm sure you agree, right?
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite initiation to perform as an officer or as a Hierophant, or what?
Oh,
What was your
yeah.
favorite?
Well, my favorite as a Hierophant was probably the Philosophus. As a Hieros, I always liked being teamed up with Alex, with Alex as Hierophant, and I'd be Hieros. But I mean, I could do a good. I was usually imitating him though when I was doing Practicus.
Alex is an amazing magician.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
talk
it was
about
always
him
fun when he would
much,
do.
but I loved the way he did Hierophant, especially.
Yeah.
Right? You know, just such a. It takes a Marine to make an initiate.
Yeah. And then I guess the Theoricus is cute. I don't know. The Theoricus is like you can smoke you light some what's it called, copal. You'd like flood the place with copal, and I don't know. It was sort of psychedelic. It was always fun to do a Theoricus initiation, but I always felt like the Practicus and the Philosophus were very serious and a little bit more demanding, especially if you were going to try to do it from memory.
That was. I mean, there was periods where things weren't done from memory, but definitely most of the time, I think the move towards having it all memorized was more of the trend. Right?
Yeah.
You know, if you were a Hierophant and you failed to memorize your lines, no one was gonna like insult you for you needing a text.
Mm.
But
yeah, people
there was
look
a
at
lot
each
more
other
respect if you memorized your lines.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, because you could transport people into a place that can only come from sacred drama and theater. That I mean, like when you're watching a good movie, you don't see Doctor Who looking at his lines, when he's taking you to another world or something. If he did, it'd suck.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand why it's hard. Like, it's very hard to, given the rigorous schedule. Like, if you're in Freemasonry, you're just doing the initiations, but in Golden Dawn, you have all these rituals you're doing in between, like just hundreds of hours of rituals, and you can't memorize everything. I'm sorry, you just can't memorize everything.
Yeah.
So it's not. I don't think it affects the energy in a major way. Even the
well, and there's the idea like
of our time don't memorize everything.
The priest uses what is it, the missal or the
the missal.
It's the idea
that was a big argument.
It's because it doesn't come from the priest; it comes from the tradition, and so it's written in the book, and so to have the book there as a symbol, then people realize that they're part of something that's ongoing or something. I don't know. It sounds like bullshit to me.
Do you think there's going to be Golden Dawn in 50 years?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There'll be just more of. I mean, I didn't even realize D&D was having a comeback. Now I feel like a trendster. But
oh yeah, you're so trendy. I was actually I went for a walk earlier to do a bunch of errands and was looking into like cancer cannabis solutions because my mom's in so much pain and I was looking for things that could be better than opiates and of course I couldn't leave the store without getting 3 sativa joints for $10 while I was there. It was just like it was basically free and smoking one on the way home. I was what were we talking about? I forgot. No, I remember. Sorry, it's like 11:30 here, and for folks listening, it's like noon. It's like lunchtime where you are.
Yeah.
I get up really early. Like I want to finish like this little segment. So but I'm trying to. What were we talking about?
Gosh,
I totally lost track. We have to do this sometime when it's late for you and it's early for me because I'm very sharp in the morning. That's when I get all my work done.
Yeah.
I like to get all my stuff done by noon.
Do you have any final thoughts about if someone's going through practicus and they're coming up against some, where the stars have lost their light and the earth
Well,
abideth
it's interesting.
not? Would you recommend that they invoke before the visible image of the soul of nature? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I think I went through in practicus happens between practicus and portal through like that period of the red and the white and the red work leading up to the solar initiation of Adeptus. And I've been talking and I've been chatting with some people who have like sort of self-initiated up to portal. And I know you did a whole episode on your podcast, which for my listeners is the Esoterinerd podcast. You should check it out. On portal problems. And portal is one of those grades. See, if you could self-initiate to a certain point, if you can, I think portal is where you're going to run into problems because it's one of those walls. And so he was describing what he's been going through now that he's used a book, which is one of the new self-initiation books that's out there. And it's all based around building the body of light and doing a lot of, 5-6 inner order rituals in the very first stages. And that's fine. So, but he hit this point where basically it was like he was documenting a lot of it on YouTube for people. And he hit a point where he came out and was like, basically, I've hit this point. I don't even know what I'm doing. I think he'd lost his job or something, and he has to like move in with his parents. He's not going to be posting videos or doing anything for a while. And this is someone, so like imagine you bust ass at an independent initiatory self-initiation system. You're doing all this ritual work. You're imagining, just imagine you're doing all this stuff and you think you're going to become this enlightened being, or at least someone who has their shit together, which is what we all do. But then of course the nature of portal and every real initiation is that it tears you apart to an extent to put you back together again. And so to me, when I heard him say that was like, okay, now I believe you've actually initiated yourself solo into portal. When you describe these problems, now that sounds like someone who's actually in that
he had come from he had come from our same group up in Chicago. But he
well, yeah, your guy did, and my guy, the guy I'm talking about is so different. But they both they what your guy told you is what this guy I found on YouTube, who's I've invited him. He and I are in touch. I've invited him to, because like if I can help anyone, I will. Like that's one thing I'll do. And it's their issues are so similar. I was like really struck by the similarity, and also by just the struggle that we all sort of seem to hit in portal, where it's like, where am I going? What am I doing with this? Have I actually gotten out of this? Because your life, I don't know. I'm at a loss for words, but maybe you can give some insight, if you have any, into the mysteries of going from that lesser circulation to that greater circulation, from like, what do you think gaining knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel is? What is it to discover a flicker of the true self, or at least enough that you can find out what your motto or name should be to represent your adept self? Like, what is that journey? What was it for you? What is it for all of us? These are the big questions that I think people really want to ask, because no one wants to just do a bunch of shit and practice rituals for years and then end up with nothing or less than they started with. They want to actually get to a place where they have that, like there's commonalities and similarities that people see in adepts, and that's the thing that people are after. And like Marcel always told me, our job is to make adepts. If you get to be there, that's your job. And part of our 5=6 vow, if you've actually comparing that to the neophyte vow that we take, and vows are a powerful thing. If you want to talk about actual powerful magic, let's talk about the vow element of initiations. But in the 5-6 vow, we vow as adepts to always help teach the students and members of the Golden Dawn. And that's one of the major reasons I'm doing what I'm doing, because no matter what, I took that vow, and that's something that I can do, is help people learn and practice the Golden Dawn system for their own spiritual growth. And I take that very seriously.
Yeah.
And that sort of trumps some of the other vows that we were talking about before that might seem to be like, oh, don't share your experience of doing this ritual. Just let people fumble around in the dark with like some half-baked books about it. And that's where like we're like, you and me both agree that's ridiculous. If I can share some insights on how to do these
Yeah.
rituals and pursue your spiritual path in a way that actually makes a difference in your daily life, let alone the course of your whole soul, then I should. And that's actually a part of our oaths as adeptus. Right? So what's the higher self? What's the holy guardian angel? What's it mean to you? What did you get out of it? Why should other people even bother with all of this chanting and vibrating and symbolism and meditation?
Well, for me, I would say, I mean, two things. One is a disclaimer that I don't pretend to know the answer to the question. You know, I mean, I could say, well, you know, when you get to about 40 and you finally get that inheritance and you can stop having to run in the rat race, but that's kind of coming from a very privileged and specific position. So if I were to mistake that for having any kind of mastery that was of my own making, then I would be a fool. That said, I got to a place where higher self, and I started to use the phrase true self.
That's what I like. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Thomas Merton uses that.
Because it's not inner, it's not outer, it's not higher, it's not lower. It's just the unmistaken one. It's the one that's not all wrapped up in knots. You know,
I like that.
In a
unmistaken one.
Yeah, in a
beautiful.
Personality or an ego or a us versus them kind of, or a I've got to live this life, or I've got to do this, or I got to do that, or I've got to not do that, or I desire to not desire anymore. All of that sort of monkey chatter stuff is not the self, and then the self is behind that. So if a person says me and they mean who it is on their driver's license and the face looking back at them in the mirror, then that's not it. The true self is underneath that, or it's behind that, or it's above that, or whatever you'd like to put it in metaphorical, geographic, relative, you know, spatial relationships. But yeah, so getting underneath that, silence can really help. Sometimes noise helps. It doesn't, sometimes a combination helps. Devotion can help, but it's not for everybody. You know, whether it be Krishna or Jesus or Shiva or whatever, like getting down on your knees and opening your heart and having tears come to your eyes when you open up to an archetype or a divinity of some kind helps. Knowledge helps. And you know, and having good relations with others, you know, certainly helps. So for some people, isolation, you know, gets it. I don't know. I think it's like fasting. Going through a period of isolation can help, even if it's half an hour. Saying, you know, don't disturb me for half an hour. I'm going to meditate. That can be enough. Yeah, I don't know. I that's all I've got, really. I don't pretend to have an answer to that one. I like to put on the dress and you know, that's how I do it. I mean, I get in touch with Jesus within me, with Yeshua Mihi Omnia, with the one true self of the universe. And to me, it's like a superhero kind of vision of the vault and all the lights going through the heart. And from there, I've been able to do some effective healing. Do I recommend that for everyone? No. I mean, like you said, like when someone asked me to explain the Rose Cross to them, I had to explain that you go through years hearing about rumors of it, and then you are allowed to know that it exists, but you're not allowed to talk about it. And then you get locked in a box for 2 days, and then they strap you to a cross and whip you. And then you get to learn about the Rose Cross. It has a certain, it could have been an upside down frog, you know, with a purple napkin, and it would have, you know, like then I would now have the healing power of the upside down frog with the purple napkin. But it happens to be the Rose Cross, which is a very primal symbol. It's got the linear and the circular. It's got the dimensions. It's got the you know, there's so much about it to love.
A lot of universal symbolism, including like the Monas Hieroglyphica of John Dee embedded within it.
Yeah, and the Rose of Sharon. I'm the bride and groom of the Songs of Solomon, and that kind of brings in all the Sufi literature. Is kind of like a growth off to the side of that one. Um, so
Well, the
and
union
he
of
went to
the
Damascus. He went to Damascus, and they named him Rosicrucian, Christian Rosencreutz. So it's fascinating to reflect on that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the idea of the union of the micro and macro prosopis,
Mm,
or Erik and Zaur and Pin, as we have it in the Kabbalah,
mm,
um, and the theories around how that happens ritually and alchemically in the Golden Dawn tradition. And these are writings that people are usually less familiar with. Also, the writings that I can't imagine, every time I reread these instructionals from the original order, when I read them, I can't imagine them actually making sense to me before I went through all of what I went through. Like,
mm,
there's something about just, you have to have walked the path to see their relevance, and then you get these insights. But also, I think it comes down to a fundamental mysticism of the true self, like you said, right? Putting together the puzzle pieces of who you are to such an extent that you not only know what you have to do in this life, but even if you don't want to do it, you're just going to do it because that's what you're meant to do, and that's how I see the great work.
mm,
You know, I don't know.
mm. Yeah. Well, certainly it's different for everybody. I'd say there's certain universals, and then each person has their kind of key and lock. They're in the relationship between micro and macro, and there's like we have to reach a bit, and at least as much as Adam on the Sistine Chapel, we have to at least extend our wrist slightly, and then the higher or the true or the macrocosmic being or self can do the rest of the reaching, and then at a certain point, there's levels of gnosis, and I mean, eventually it leads somewhere. I don't think it leads to shooting bullets out of when people have expectations that they have to be let down, like having superpowers or something.
Yeah. There's definitely powers. I don't think they're super. I think they're very human.
Yeah, natural powers.
Yeah. But we'll talk about that another time, perhaps. Do you think
Yeah.
there's a last? Could you leave people maybe with an idea of, like, a lot of people are overwhelmed by the sheer overwhelming amount of ritual practices that are competing for their attention. What are one of or some of the main ritual practices from the Hermetic tradition that you think are really worth taking seriously, or that are maybe overlooked or something like that?
Well, one thing that I want to get back into is a self-conducted mass. I was thinking of because I think I have a
I
PDF of the
just,
old second order mass,
bro,
and
I just, okay, sorry, you finish.
oh yeah. You remember the old second order mass, or at least scripts of it? People
Yeah,
talking
so
about
I
it.
just I just bought a bunch of Brasso
Oh,
and was
nice.
polishing my chalice and the patent for the bread and salt.
Yeah.
And I've because I didn't have those tools. I've been using substitute tools for the last few years. But for me, what I've always called it is the Osirian Eucharist.
Yeah.
And I actually just found a bunch of old documents of ours that were altered based on what TDL and we at Tahuti had done, and then taken by Martin and rewritten with Pat Zaleski's supervision, and then put out for his Horus Temple in Montreal. And I like our version, but I've got a hybrid version
Mm.
coming together of that second order, inner order mass, or Assyrian Eucharist, and I'll send it to you and see what you
Oh,
think,
nice.
because there's a lot of different ways to do it. But essentially, the Eucharist, as we know it from the neophyte initiation, that is definitely especially as a priest, the cornerstone of my ritual practice.
Mm.
So I do all my rituals, but then it's about partaking of the four elements
Yeah.
through the body of Osiris and Ofris, and those invocations, the invocation of the higher genius, and all of that. That is my central ritual work, and including a bit of bornless stuff and all that. And of course, the
Yeah.
inner vault.
Yeah, exactly. For me, my personal work, it requires a lot of explanation, of course, for like I wouldn't for you. You remember premise 14?
Yeah.
With the Typhoerid square on each of the 7 walls as from inside the column. That's what I do. I call it the ritual of the 7 Typhoerids, because if I call it premise 14, people will have no idea what I'm talking about.
I think this is the first time that anyone has referred to the premises on public. That's something that even the heretical soul within my heart would not share. But you're even more heretical than me, so let it rip, baby.
I wrote
Tell them
S2.
about all the 32 premises.
Right. No, I wrote the S2 based on the premise 14, and the S2 became a ritual that everybody in the outer did.
Well, you have to send me that.
Oh yeah. It's sort of like the same thing, but with archangels or with angels and a cauldron. So like you dump all your indigo energy into a cauldron, and then you turn around and face Cassiel, and you get an influx of pure, untainted, divine. But Saturn, indigo, you get your indigo fuel change, like oil change, and then Sachiel, you get the purple oil change, and Zamael, the red one, and so on and so forth. So it's like a slow, earthy version of the premise 14. But for people who understand it, people who know about energetic working in the vault already, then it's just basically connecting with the dot inside the rows above, the dot inside the rows below, the dot inside the rows within, and making a column. And it's almost like a kundalini, like the energy circulating with the bandhas. Like you can get yogic about it, but it's like, for me, it's a gold and pink column, and then from there, from the inner rows cross, connecting with the Typhoerid squares of each of the 7 walls in whatever way works. And of course, they all have their own individual interesting colors, so it ends up being a very interestingly colored flower. And that's where I do my healing work from. Then I either do that as another person, or I do that for another person, and then sometimes for myself. And that's really the only healing work I do. I'm not interested in Reiki or that.
After learning what we learned, man, there's nothing else has ever interested me at all. Not at all.
Yeah. So I skip to that. I do LBRP, BRH, middle pillar, adoration, invocation, and then Rose Cross, and then that. Seven Typhoerids, and then that's it. And then final release. That's pretty much all I do.
I would say I focused on a different premise for my most powerful techniques, along with things like the beak and stuff. And the premises, I've used them in situations where
you can beak like a sewing machine.
Found. Well, these are what the Indian tradition would all call cities, right? That's what they would call these, is cities.
Yeah.
Powers. They're powers. And like Dion Fortune says, is you can't rise up the tree of life by focusing on the powers, because the powers pertain to Yachin and Boaz, the pillars of force and form. That's where you find the powers, is in the side Sphirot, in the side Sephiroth.
Like the lotus rising up gets distracted by the occult powers fish.
Yeah, you can't. You have to focus on that middle pillar of consciousness, and then the powers, they come as they come. But if you focus on the powers, you end up getting corrupted and afflicted. And like the Christians say, and this is my methodology, is to, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, and try and help everyone raise their consciousness a little bit. And along the way, a few powers might come that have real drastic effects in the world around you. You can glitch that matrix out in certain ways, to the extent that other people will notice it and be astounded by the wonders, like Jesus himself would say. For what powers I have, you will have greater than these. And that is the Rosicrucian tradition. And I have actually a lot more to say on this, but hey, there's always next time, right, bro?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, God, I can't believe that we actually got to talk and do this. I know this is going to send shockwaves through the magical occult world of on all those Wiccans who don't know what we're talking about. They'll be like, "You're all snooty and like memorizing Hebrew and Kabbalah." It's like, yes, we are snooty. I'm just joking. I've finished like a bottle of wine, so what can I say? It's bedtime. It's time to watch some Schitt's Creek and pass out.
Right.
Oh wow, hey dude, if we can actually let's just talk for 10 more minutes. We'll hit the 3 hour mark and then I will love you forever.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
All right. Okay, tell me the craziest thing that's happened to you recently.
Oh man, the craziest thing. The craziest
Do you have
thing.
any COVID stories? Can I ask you a
COVID
question?
stories. Yeah,
Let me ask you a conspiracy theory question.
sure.
I've been asking this of people and shocked by the results. Have you known anyone since February or March that's gotten the flu or even gotten a cold?
I think that Pio had a fever for a little while and took something for it and it went
But
away.
it wasn't COVID?
Well, I mean, old high school friends and stuff on Facebook, but I mean, I don't really, we don't, hang out with a lot of people here locally.
There's a theory going around that, of course, like we're being poisoned and that other diseases are being held back and stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going around, man. I don't know what to think. I'm praying that this is all about aliens and they'll show up. Because I never believed in aliens, actually, or ghosts. But there's been a lot of new developments in what we know about science and reality and history.
It's honestly, I think it's the dog-faced demons. Again. It's the Omega Point, Tellier Desjardins Omega Point, and the dog-faced demons battling it out again, like in the galactic days of yore.
You think so?
A little bit. Well, yeah, like, because I remember I thought when, like a lot of people, were so optimistic when the internet was new that, wow, now we're going to be able to exchange knowledge with everyone in the world and find out we're all just alike and some kind of internal revolutions, this kind of thing. But then, it ends up looking really bizarre and allowing for subgroups of any kind. I mean, that's the thing, is it's a positive and it's a negative. So on one hand, occult groups or Dungeons and Dragons or, trans or, in any, like, if you're the only quote unquote weirdo of whatever kind in your high school, you can connect with 10,000 people just like you, whether it's incel or conspirituality or whatever
Incel.
it is.
I don't know what an incel is, man. People are always calling me, like, people are always saying things like cis and incel to me, and I'm like, what are these words you are making up? I do
involuntary celibate. It's the people who blow up malls. Children who blow up malls in the name of girls not wanting to sleep with them or something.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's weird. And then the
I don't know if that's
cis is when you're when you're
like
not
hate speech.
When you're not trans, I think, right? When you
cis
identify with
like
the gender of your chromosomes, then
you're basically
cis.
so if you identify with the gender that you're born as or look like, you're just basically a cyst on the evolving body of humanity.
Oh, it's just CIS.
From no, you're a cyst. I'm changing it. You're a cyst because Aleister Crowley had this vision of the androgyne future of humanity, and if you are rejecting it, you're just a cyst that needs to be removed. I don't know. I'm talking shit. What would be more interesting to talk about is you're discovering the trend of D&D, which I found out was happening. Like I've dabbled here and there, but so I've been recruited to now run a 5th edition game, which I've never run 5th edition. So they're going to have to help me out with the new rules, but any chance to roll a D20 is a good thing in my opinion. Yeah. So I'll be doing that twice a month with a socially distanced group here. And what are you doing? Are you going to play some Dungeons and Dragons, man?
Well, right now I'm just learning and getting all the stuff that you're supposed to have. If you want to be a DM, I'm a wannabe DM. I'm DM poser core. Like I like
Dude,
to buy
dude.
D&D stuff and set them up
There's-
as if I did anything.
Yeah. There's online platforms like Roll20.
Mm.
We could do a monthly like adept D&D game on Roll20, and we could do some D&D once a month.
I don't know. I resist anything that's scheduled.
I know you do, baby. You're a Virgo. You're a child of Mercury, and
But right now,
yeah.
I'm just learning. If I learn this and then learn Hindi, then at a certain point I could start doing. But otherwise, I can do games, of course, for people who speak fluent English. But yeah, I don't know. I'm an aspiring DM, but and there was
I
a.
think you can make more money, I think, as a DM online these days than doing most things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your new career path.
Yeah, yoga, DM yoga.
Well, that's
D&D
great that you're getting into it. I've always loved telling stories. I think telling stories in an interactive format with people. I used to do it in improv acting or Dungeons and Dragons or any role playing games, or and that's why I think initiation and ritual magic appealed to me so much, is because the art of psychodrama or storytelling that changes the people, even if they're doing it through a character, is just so powerful, and something that we're missing in our culture for some reason.
Yeah, Disney shouldn't have the only right to shape people's mind with imagery and well-delivered lines.
Well, Disney's hit or miss with the well-delivered lines. If you, the new Star
But
Wars
every once in a
film,
while, they've got the
that.
music that when people used to go to the theater back in the day.
Oh yeah, big time. So, are you going to make a D&D character? I can't believe you and me are talking about D&D publicly, but that's great. Fuck it. What are you going to make? Are you going to be a barbarian? Are you going to be a rogue? Are you going to be a gay?
Probably a rogue at first.
BDSM thief.
Probably maybe something weird like a rogue half elf that the humans don't like him because he's part elf, and the elves don't like him because he's part human, and so he or a ranger. No, I won't.
Rangers are great. Rangers are super fun.
And but maybe neutral-ish, like chaotic neutral, or well, I don't know. I should probably start with like lawful neutral or lawful good or something.
My favorite games are always the ones where people start really at first level hardcore, and they don't even really know what their class is. They have a class, but they're like in a village or some shit, and their dad just gets killed. And then like some people are passing through town, and they're like, okay, I guess you can come with us. And that way you're like, if anyone hits you, you might die. So you're really on edge. You really have to focus on storytelling and character interaction, because you can't just go hack and slash, or you're going to get slaughtered in 2 seconds,
Right. Yeah.
So the stories that force you to figure out social strategies are really fun. And then, of course, once you get good at that and get more powerful, then you can handle bigger enemies and threats and challenges. But in the beginning, it's really fun to focus on that narrative journey of how a nobody becomes a somebody.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, from reading the DM book, I'm getting to see how the structure applies to so many shows. There was that recent one with the new Merlin, but it was a female fae that was the star. I forget the name of it. Cursed. The Cursed was something straight out of D&D. Like with the paladins and all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah, I sort of know that. I don't know. You know what you need to read is my favorite new novel of the last 10 years, or 12 years, is Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind. I mean, the book's basically written about a fantasy version of me, so I relate.
Nice.
But no, it's actually just a really great book, and it's won awards for a reason. Check that out, Name of the Wind.
Okay.
The way they do magic is really, really interesting. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. And yes, one day we'll play D&D together in India.
Sure,
Goa.
you can teach me. Actually, if you've done it before, I'd be glad if you would show me the ropes. Or you can lead a game.
If I've done it before,
where I can be your one player, and you can lead me on a mini adventure.
Dude, me and Daniel, before he joined the Golden Dawn and took over Temple Tahuti and then fucked up Frater Yeshi's order, he and I would just spend 3-4 days straight. And over 6 months or a year, we would play campaigns with just the two of us, with a character each, and one taking turns DMing that would last. Like,
Nice.
it would go on hundreds and hundreds of hours. Like, we'd get up to level 30 over the course of a couple years with just the same two characters.
Wow.
And yeah, you get really into it in a serious way. And like, you know, it was actually always funny. We couldn't, like, you know, a parent would come in to ask if they could make us food, because, you know, lucky us. But we would just stare at them and like barely say a word, like, nope, fine, thanks. And they're like, they'd watch us and we'd be like, what are you doing here? But even at that young age, I remember feeling like we were in a bubble, like an egregore of this energy and thought world. And it's like we barely saw each other. We were existing in this other plane. It was very astral and it was very real. And you get to that place of energetic creation that is so powerful that it becomes more real than the real world. And I thought that, I always retrospected that was like really good magical training in a way, because the imagination is so powerful, it can literally overwrite our daily reality. You know what I mean? And I don't know, Magic and pen and paper, Dungeons and Dragons and role playing and all those games really were sort of the same thing to me, because you know, you can play a character that actually is struggling with things that you don't struggle with, but that relate or are analogous to things you struggle with. And in playing out that story and narrative, it's like a form of therapy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think a lot
stuff.
of people came from D&D into Golden Dawn, but I had friends who did D&D. I never did D&D, but I always kind of wanted to. But then watching Stranger Things,
getting girls.
Pew was really curious about Stranger Things. I mean, about D&D, because that was what they were playing in Stranger Things. And so I started buying. I was like, I'm going to buy for both of us. I'm going to buy some D&D stuff. But then, like, she eventually made me admit that I was just buying it for myself.
Never admit that. No, never admit to your wife that the gifts that are for her are actually for you, man. That's 101.
Now I'm getting a chalice from Catholic Supply, and it's a gift for both of us. She's like, don't say it's a gift for both of us. But when I told her what it was, she agreed that's a gift for both of us. It'll go on the Jesus shrine. Yeah.
Oh man, I can't wait to meet her. She sounds wonderful. And it sounds like you have a great life going on there.
Yeah, it's going well. Touch wood, as they say here. Knock wood, as we say there.
Jesus, well, thanks, man. I guess this is the time to leave it. So
I think I'm going to turn this into a two-parter. So you're welcome to do whatever you want with it. You can throw this all in one episode, but I'm going to split it in half and keep people in suspense for a few days or a week or something.
I have so many different names. You could even use a different name on each episode.
Yeah, like you don't mind your proper name being used?
Well, you know, you could do that, or you could do like outer order motto for one, inner order motto for the other. Who knows? You could have so much fun with it. You could make up a D&D character name for a fictional version of myself for the second part.
I think from a marketing strategist point of view, I should find a good pithy one-liner, you know, for each, you know, that would pique people's interest. And because nobody's interested in Elegwin or Edward except for our friends and family, but the Dark Night of the Soul for the first one maybe, and then the second one could be something else. I don't know. I'll think of it when I'm editing and post.
You know, let follow your intuition. Follow your intuition. You know, yeah, that's all that matters, right? I mean, we're all just a bunch of clowns, sort of like dancing through this illusory realm that we call life in the world, right? And like, what's it really mean at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Well, it to this day to me, it doesn't seem like it means anything more than we decide it means. So therefore, that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. In fact, it's the opposite. The fact that we get to co-create our reality means that what we choose is absolutely essential, crucial, just the most important thing that you could ever imagine mattering in your reality is the decision of what this reality is going to mean to you in your lifetime. Like that's the whole deal, right? It's total power. Make it matter. Otherwise, you're just throwing it away, right?
Yeah, it's like thinking of the vault symbolism. People get stuck in the ceiling, they get stuck in the floor. Sometimes they get stuck in the walls in between. But when you can embody the whole thing, and you can go out the top and into the light of Ein Sof, and you can go to be free to move and to embody and to shapeshift, like you said about the heroic dose. That is, I think, a worthy goal. Where getting stuck someplace, sometimes people think that's the goal, like happily ever after, being stuck in the ceiling, or stuck in some particular square, depending on what they think happy means, you know.
Yeah, I've talked about that a lot, actually.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, those are my thoughts on something.
All right, bro.
Okay.
I love you.
Love you
I
too.
miss you. You're beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And give my love to your wife. Tell her I will come and harass you in India someday soon.
Nice. All right. Have a good night.
Shall we invoke a little light before the end? And I'll say conks. I'll say cabs.
Pecked.
Conks.
Rather than doing it in the order of
we can do it good. We can do it properly. Ready?
We'll just alternate.
Check it out. Cabs. Pecked.
Conks. Packs.
Light.
In. Extension.
We did it.
Yeah.
Oh, I should start doing that at the end of all my podcasts. I think that'd be hardcore. And the listeners can do it along. It's powerful, man. That's like, even jokingly, it's powerful. So,
yeah. All right.
Much love, brother.
Much love. Talk soon.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye. Thank you, very honored Frater RC, for being our guest today on the Esoterinerd podcast. Special thanks to Susumu Ueda and his father and the other monks at Jofuku-in Temple on Mount Koyasan for the music that you're hearing right now. It's the same track as the beginning of the episode. Thank you to Camille and Kennerly for the harp intro and outro to the episode. And most importantly, thank you to you, the Esoterinerd, listening to this podcast. Go forth in love, truth, and knowledge. Cobs pecked, conks pax, light in extension.
In this darkly splendid world, I went to make my way one day through the dark night like a child. I set out to find the one true way on the forest too damn long. By the Abbey Agnes mountainside, woke up to the golden dawn, and to Telestai I learned to cry. And when all the phantoms vanish and I see the formless fire, as we dance within the moonlight, naked in nature's empire. In the vault of light I heard the whisperings of some god unknown, like a lover's gentle word. I knew that it was time now to atone for the sweethearts that I wronged, for the sorrows of Isis who seeks for the kisses that belong upon only one true lover's cheek. And when all the phantoms vanish and I see the formless fire, as we dance within the moonlight, naked in nature's empire. My Into darkness we must go to initiate all we can be. My true will I must know. Open your eyes now and come with me, for the sweat our bodies share, for the wine and bread your body is. Please, my story, know I care. Aphrodite, goddess, you're my bliss. And when all the phantoms vanish and I see the formless fire, as we dance within the moonlight, naked in nature's empire. And old Enoch rose above, but he had not yet seen your face. Now I'm trapped between your love and the other side, filled up with grace. So let's dance into the night, round the fire of our passion's flame. This truth we cannot fight, we cannot deny our lover's name. And when all the phantoms vanish and I see the formless fire, as we dance within the moonlight, naked in nature's empire.
Stoop not down into that darkly splendid world wherein continually lies a faithless depth and Hades wrapped in clouds, delighting in unintelligible images, precipitous, winding, a black ever-rolling abyss, ever espousing a body unluminous, formless, and void. Nature persuadeth us that there are pure demons, and that even the evil germs of matter may alike become useful and good. But these are mysteries which are evolved in the profound abyss of the mind. Such a fire existeth, extending through the rushings of air, or even a fire formless whence cometh the image of a voice, or even a flashing light, abounding, revolving, whirling forth, crying aloud. Also there is the vision of the fire-flashing courser of light, or also a child borne aloft on the shoulders of the celestial steed, fiery or clothed with gold, or naked, or shooting with the bow shafts of light, and standing on the shoulders of a horse. But if thy meditation prolongeth itself, thou shalt unite all these symbols